L'Honorable Ministre.
The Honourable Minister.
Speaker, I would like to remind the colleague opposite that in the Ag Committee last week, one of Canada's foremost expert on food policies, Sylvain Charlebois from Dalhousie University, said, and I quote, Madam Speaker, we don't see the evidence of that, talking about the impact of carbon pricing on food in Canada. And actually, they invited him to speak at the Ag Committees, Madam Speaker, so I think we have it here. The Bank of Canada has said that pricing pollution is not having a material impact on inflation in Canada. It's less than 0.5%. We know that
The honourable member for Cypress Hills Grasslands.
Madam Speaker, the Prime Minister blew over $60 million taxpayer dollars for his Arrive scam app in a corruption scandal that's looking worse day by day. This NDP Liberal government is also going to force grocery, gas and home heating prices to go up on April 1st as they increase the carbon tax another 23%. After 8 years of being scammed and robbed by this Prime Minister, Canadians know that he's not worth the cost or the corruption. So why won't he just admit that his income redistribution scam is toast and just axe the tax?
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry.
Madam Speaker, the hypocrisy of the Conservatives is just off the charts. Conservatives use the hardship of people that are in food bank lineups for political gain, but when it comes to actually helping Canadians, they're nowhere to be found. They adamantly oppose every real solution we put forward. They've said no to a grocery rebate. They are delaying competition reforms. They voted against a framework for implementing a national school food program. It's appalling. And just a couple of weeks ago, we learned that their top advisor to the leader of the opposition, Jenny Byrne, is a lobbyist for Loblaws. Well, Canadians can tell whose corner they're in, and it's...
The Honourable Member for Lac Saint Louis. Madam Speaker, we are proud of Quebec's businesses. They create jobs and they support economic growth. The member for Chicoutimi-Le-Fjord mentioned during a parliamentary committee meeting that there is sometimes a lack of financing and funding for businesses, but the Conservatives voted against funding for businesses. Can the minister responsible for the Economic Development Agency of Canada and the regions of Quebec tell us how our government's programs support the growth and resilience of the supply chains of Quebec's companies? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Indeed, the Economic Development Agency of Canada for the regions of Quebec has existed for 50 years, and in that time it has supported billions of dollars worth of support for businesses in Quebec. On the one hand, members of the Conservative Party, Quebecers, say that they want to support businesses, but then they vote against funding against the agency's funding for programs. They voted against, for example, the Regional Economic Growth Fund. I will continue to work with the member for Lac Saint Louis to support all of Quebec's regions and all of Quebec's businesses. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker, after 8 years, this NDP Liberal government is going to raise the tax on beer, wine, and spirits again on April 1st for the 8th year in a row. Wow. Most Canadians can barely afford to eat, heat, and house themselves, and we know that this Prime Minister is not worth the cost, but our brewers, vintners, and distillers know that this government is harming their industries. Yes, they are. For once, will they cancel this year's undemocratic automatic tax increase and bring back happy hour for Canadians?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
What we will ensure, Madam Speaker, is a continued competitive environment for brewers and vintners, and that environment is one that allows for people to go out and buy their beer or buy their wine or whatever they wish to do with their free time. In this country, we want to ensure continued success. And what do we see? A very low unemployment rate, lower than what was the case before the pandemic, a better GDP rate as compared to before the pandemic. They want to cut EI, they want to cut CP, they want to cut the dental benefit, the child care benefit, all of it, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Rocky Ridge.
The Parliamentary Secretary wants to help Canadians and help industry by raising their taxes 8 years in a row. On Canada's taxes on beer, wine, and spirits are already among the highest in the entire world. Brewers spend more than twice as much on production tax than they do on wages for their well-paid unionized workers, proving that this Prime Minister is not worth the cost to Canadian jobs. If this NDP Liberal government can't give happy hour back to Canadian consumers, will they at least axe the automatic tax increase on industry, exporters, small businesses, unionized production workers, retailers, and restaurant servers?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
As I said, Madam Speaker, we will continue to do everything we can to ensure a competitive environment for brewers, for the Vintner sector, and for all Canadian businesses. But it's interesting, the member talks about unions. That's what stood out in his question. The Conservative Party is the party of unions all of a sudden? I couldn't think of anything less true. Throughout their tenure in office from 2006 to 2015, they did everything they could to make sure that unions had no power, no role in this country's decision-making. We've engaged in unions, we've engaged with Labour, we'll continue to do exactly that.
The honourable member for Regina, Wascana.
Madam Speaker, after 8 years of this Liberal NDP government, this Prime Minister is just not worth the cost. On April 1st, he will once again be raising his carbon tax by 23% on gas, groceries, and home heating. Also on April 1st, he will be raising his excise tax on beer, wine, and spirits by another 4.7%. When will this Prime Minister stop his cruel April Fool's Day jokes and give Canadians a break?
The Honourable Minister.
Actually, quite interested in the member opposite's question, because what he's effectively saying is that he is not in favour of the members and his people in his province receiving $1,500 in the carbon rebate that our government, is putting back in the pockets of Canadians. So $1,500, Madam Speaker, and that's along with rebates across our country, $1,100 in Ontario, $1,200 in Manitoba. The contrast is clear.
The honourable member for Kitchener South, Hesler.
Madam Speaker, this April, residents of Kitchener South Hesler will be receiving their first quarterly installment of the Canada Carbon Rebate. Can the Minister of Environment and Climate Change Canada share with this House how these rebates are reducing emissions while making life more affordable for Canadians in provinces where the federal backstop system applies?
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Climate Change.
The Canada Carbon Rebate is increasing, and Ontario family of four will receive $280 for family of four per quarterly payments throughout the year. What we're doing, Madam Speaker, is we're making big polluters pay more for their pollution. What the Conservative Party wants to do is make pollution free for those big polluters. Like oil companies, we're making record level profits. Not on this side of the House, Madam Speaker. We will work to continue fighting climate change, supporting Canadian through the Canada Carbon Rebate, and help fight climate change.
The honourable member for London Fanshawe.
A 75-year-old Palestinian Canadian is stuck in Gaza, and he is in poor health and he needs medical care. He went to Rafah, and no Canadian ambassadors were there to help him leave. His son, my constituent, told me that his father has been used as a human shield by the Israeli military to force Gazans out of their homes. He is worried sick. This government has had 4 months to secure the safe passage of Canadians out of Gaza. Other countries have done it, so why can't this government ensure the safe return of Canadians and their families from Gaza?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the Honourable Member for her advocacy. I know that she reached out to the Minister about this case yesterday, as have other MPs reached out to me personally about this case. We are in constant contact with our consular officials in the region. We're also in contact with the relevant countries, with COGAT, which is the body that is in charge of whether or not people can leave. We're deeply troubled when we hear stories of these Canadians who are unable to leave Gaza, and we will continue our advocacy, and we will not stop until we get all Canadians home. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Spadina, Fort York.
Madam Speaker, in Toronto, auto thefts have increased by 25.4%, and $500 million worth of cars were stolen last year. Because this government was asleep at the wheel, our cities are not only less safe, experts are projecting car insurance premiums could be going up by as much as 25%. On average, that's an extra $600 a year that people cannot afford. Madam Speaker, auto theft summits make for good photo ops, so what people need is action. The government must put up serious roadblocks to combat thefts. Will the government finally give police and the CBSA the tools, funding, and personnel they desperately need to keep us safe?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And it's unfortunate the Honourable Member calls the summit that was held last week a photo op. I and my colleagues were there and actually heard from stakeholders. We heard from insurance companies, and I spoke to one of the chiefs of police who said, not only is this important, but we need to do this more often and formalize these kind of dialogues, because the only way that we will solve the problem of auto theft is by working together, by working with insurance companies, by working with border services, and making the kind of investments like $120 million to Ontario through the initiative to take action against guns and violence, which the minister just introduced recently, and $28 million to support the work of CPSA.
And that brings us to the end of question period. Have a good weekend, those of you who are having to exit, and a good week in the constituency. Tabling of documents. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Health.
Thank you, Speaker. Sub 2, and consistent with the policy on the tabling of treaties in Parliament, I have the honour to table in both official languages the treaty entitled Amendments to the International Health Regulations 2005, adopted at Geneva on May 28, 2022. Thank you.
Tabling of documents. Introduction of government bills. Statements by ministers.
Reports from interparliamentary delegation. Presenting reports from committees.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have the honour to present in both official languages the 13th report of the Standing Committee on Government Operations and Estimates, the MINEOGO, in relation to the motion adopted on Wednesday, February 14, 2024, regarding a request to the Auditor General of Canada to conduct a performance audit on the contracts awarded to GC Strategies. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Presenting reports from committees. Dépôt de projet de loi émanant des députés.
Introduction of private members' bills. First reading of Senate public bills.
Sénat. Motion.
Presenting petition.
The Honourable Member for Dauphin, Swan River, Nipawin.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's an honour to present a petition on behalf of constituents. Madam Speaker, I rise for the 32nd time on behalf of the people of Swan River, Manitoba, to present a petition on the rising rate of crime. The community of Swan River is consumed with unprecedented levels of crime because of this government's soft-on-crime laws like Bill C-5 and Bill C-75. Bill C-5 allows criminals to serve their sentences from home, and Bill C-75 allows violent offenders to be in jail in the morning and back on the streets in the evening. The people of Swan River are calling for jail, not bail, for violent repeat offenders. Madam Speaker, the people of Swan River demand that this Liberal government repeal their soft-on-crime policies that directly threaten their livelihoods and their community. I support the good people of Swan River.
Presenting petitions, the Honourable for Red Deer, Mountain View.
Madam Speaker, today I rise to table a petition on behalf of correctional officers in Mission, Mascot, Fraser Canyon, and surrounding areas who are concerned about the prison needle exchange program currently being operated by Correctional Services Canada. Drugs and drug paraphernalia are considered contraband in prisons, yet this government is forcing our correctional officers to simply turn a blind eye and allow dangerous drugs to be used inside of prisons. These correctional officers are calling on the government to immediately cancel the prison needle exchange program, stop permitting the use of illicit drugs in Canadian prisons, and to focus efforts on helping inmates recover from their addictions. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Presenting petitions, the Honourable Member for Yorkton Melville. You have to get up.
I'm from Yorkton Melville, Madam Speaker, so it's for me? Okay, thank you very much. It was a little confusing. It was good. Gotcha. Okay, thank you. Well, Madam Speaker, I'm bringing forward two petitions today. The first one is in regard to the fact that all of us in this House know that the level of domestic violence and violent crimes across Canada has risen significantly under this government. It's also well established in this House and across Canada that the risk of violence against pregnant women is greater. And yet this government fails to bring in any legislation that impacts